What's up, fucker? It's your boy, Slacky J. Fights Gone By podcast, episode 216, 217, one or the other. Coming at you after midweek fights. Is there anything more extravagant? We'll watch the midweek fights in Abu Dhabi and then everyone come back to my suite atop the Savoy Hotel and we'll do coke off a flapper's tits. But on the subject of flapping tits, let's talk about Dan Ige versus Calvin Kattar and the other fights on that card. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great card lineup, but it was okay. Dan Ige versus Calvin Kattar was, I felt, another example of Dan Ige coming in with a really bad game plan. He did against Edson Barboza. He got the decision in that one, didn't he? And it was very controversial. But in the Edson Barboza fight, he had a guy who is going to struggle whenever you start moving him backwards. He's going to put himself on the fence. And Ige is a really good fence wrestler. Like, if you watch him, I mean, not in the his fights on the Contender Series, but also his fights in the UFC. He gets on the fence, he gets them down by the fence, they do the wall walk, he folds them down on the far wrist, he does the usual Habib stuff, and he's really good at it. And he takes the back and can often finish from there. But against Barboza, he comes forward, he goes on a straight line, shifting him with a couple of punches, and then he angles out the side door and relieves any pressure that was under Barboza to back up towards the fence. And like, Barboza doesn't angle out well. So you angling off on him is taking him off the fence. He's going to go, oh, okay, right, look at all that space I can waltz through now. Or do the straight-legged Bambi on stilts jog around the ring that he always does. So that was odd. And then he fought Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar's best assets, his punching, but especially his jab, and using that to set up long straight rights. He often surprises people with the length of his straight right. He really goes through on it. So he can throw the jab and it might just catch them on the end of his reach, but then he'll come through with the right hand and it's longer. Really good at accentuating his right straight, but good with the right uppercut, good with body shots. But the jab is where it all starts. And the thing that he has the most trouble in the world with is low kicks. For the reasons that we touch on every week at the moment, it seems like if you want to use the jab, you have to have one foot out in front of you. To do that, you open yourself up, or doing that rather, you open yourself up to get low kicked. And Kattar has been terrible at dealing with low kicks in the past. Jeremy Stephens had a lot of success with them. Obviously, Moicano had amazing success timing him, stepping in each time, to the point that he tried to invent a new style of punching on the spot where you don't put your leg in as you go into box, and it just didn't work. But in the course of this fight, and you know, it'll tell you that he doesn't deal with low kicks, because in this fight, 17 of 22 landed. But if you only throw 20 kicks over a 25-minute fight against a guy who has a hell of a lot of trouble with kicks, what on earth is that game planning? And then he'd go back to his corner and his corner man would go, fight IQ. That was advice. It was a very strange fight. And he did all right in the first 3 rounds and then really fell off towards the 4th and 5th. And Kattar really poured it on. Again, made it more interesting, the idea of that full 5-rounder against Zabit. But Zabit managed to get a 3-rounder in a main event. Classic Zabit. One day we'll see him go 5 rounds. But Kattar was good in this one. You know, he showed his jab lots, used his jab lots. To be fair to Ige, you know, he is a good boxer, good puncher, decent at those things. He landed a nice pull right hand counter over the jab at one point. He was using body jabs and body straights and right hooks to the body to set up blows upstairs. He popped Kattar's nose all across his face because Kattar had his nose broken, like, is it 2 months ago now against Jeremy Stephens? So couldn't have been healed all the way. And obviously the more you break your nose, the more inclined it is to re-break when you get hit in it, until you get the Vanderlei Silva nose and then you get your face done and you look like an eagle. But that's Dan Ige in a nutshell. Like, he is about as skilled in each area as most people on the roster need to be. You know, he's enormously talented. He's got a lot of skill in a lot of areas, but the way that he fights deliberately de-emphasizes all his skills. Like, even watching that fight, well, if you didn't watch it, we did a film room earlier in the week where we do alternate commentaries, and we did the free fight they had up for Dan Ige, which was against Luis J. Gomez, Michael Bisping's podcasting partner. No, just some guy called Luis Gomez. And in that fight, like, he was clearly better than this guy, but he was making more of a fight of it by not making good tactical decisions. Just, I'm going to box, I'm going to switch stances out in the open and box, and he's just not effective enough doing that. You know, he makes very long, plodding fights out of these fights that he could be dominating. And it's a little bit like in my long critique about women's MMA the other week, one exchange to the next doesn't seem to matter much. I mean, he does go low to build up high. It's just one sprinting exchange, turn, reset. next sprinting exchange. Keita was looking good in this one. His jab was sharp as ever, but what we talked about with his jab with the Burgos fight and in the film room, he does it straight from the arm. Like, the shoulder doesn't pump first. Obviously there's a hinge at the shoulder, but he doesn't push his shoulder in, which really throws people off. Like, Burgos, great at slipping jabs, does it every fight, like, to set up his offense, and he was getting stuck on the end of it. And it helps that Keita feints his jab about 3 different ways. He'll do one with like a little step in and drop his weight, and then he'll do one where he just sort of like shoves the shoulder at the opponent, and then he'll do one where the shoulder stays still and he moves his hand a couple of inches and then pulls it back in. All of which keeps him fairly safe. He's not opening himself up, but he is creating openings in the opponent or just dulling their reactions so that he can sneak it through later. So that main event, like, it got a bit one note and plodding, and then towards the end, Ige really dropped off hard. Dan Ige, he could just hang around in the UFC forever being a middle-of-the-pack guy. But if he it might be that he's not very coachable. It might be that he doesn't follow game plans well. It might be that, like, his corner are like Dean Thomas asking Tyron Woodley for volumes and combinations between every round of every fight. But it also might be that he's just not getting the game planning he needs from whatever team he's at. So what else was good on this card? I mean, in the run-up to this card, I was looking at Abdul Razak Al-Hassan because he's got a lot of exciting knockouts on his record, and I'm looking at it going, is this guy good or what? Like, I don't get it, because the knockouts are spazzy, flailing shit. He's had 2 really weird fights against, what was that? Was it Hamasi? Let me look this up. Yeah, poor old Sabah Hamasi got gypped in the first fight by like a crap stoppage where he wasn't actually out. And then in the second fight, there was it an abysmal stand-up? Well, plenty of abysmal stand-ups last night, but there was some weird piece of officiating, got him taken out of top position. And then he immediately got knocked out after that. But then Al-Hassan fought Nico Price and just spazzed out on him for 40 seconds. Did the same thing to Charlie Ward back in 2016. And the one fight that he did have that went to the decision, he lost. So, you had the sense that he was not an over-the-distance sort of fighter. He was kind of like Sokoju, came from the judo background, had the very upright stance, heavy hips, very hard to take down, and swung hard, But this lad, what's his name, Munir Lazez, did brilliantly, I thought. Lots wrong with his performance, in my opinion, in the first round. Like, he just sort of covered up with his gloves right against his head, which just does not work in MMA gloves. So Al-Hassan's just cracking him with free blows, basically. But he did make use of the intercepting knee wonderfully, which is a weapon I feel we're always talking about, but we're talking about it in respect to Holloway, Volkanovski. Just any time you're dealing with someone who's covering a lot of distance or very aggressive, the knee to the floating rib, or the liver, on the other side, will very quickly settle them down. And I think that people, the whole reason the body shots aren't seen as much as you would like them to be in MMA anyway, is because dudes, even when you're talking about body shots, we tend to fetishize the knockout body shots. Like, everyone's favorite body shots in boxing are that Ricky Hatton one where the guy does a full pirouette, and the Roy Jones, Virgil Hill one, one-punch body shot knockouts. Whereas people using body shots effectively are just doing them all the time. And then there's just a moment in the fight where it all switches, where the other guy just goes, oh, fuck, I'm bollocksed. Uh-oh. And everything starts going downhill. And you saw that in this one, like, couple of knees go in, couple more knees go in. Suddenly Al-Hassan's like, okay, I'm not going to walk him down anymore, I'm going backwards. Because every time he takes them, as he walks in, he goes, ooh, even if he's not knocked down by them. But he's very aware that he's walking himself onto the knee. And the same was true of the up elbows. And then Al-Hassan, whose whole thing is like walking people down and swinging wild, backed up. And that was when he lost the fight. Started trying to throw low kicks and didn't want to step in with his hands. And then there were takedowns, and then the ref was fucking garbage. Like, literally, not even side control, almost Von Flue position. Al-Hassan had one hand trapped around the opponent's neck with his hand underneath their chest. And like the ref was like, I need action, lads. I need action, stand up. Just dreadful reffing. But yeah, that knee, beautiful. Sometimes it was straight up the middle, particularly intercepting. But sometimes he was throwing it on the angle like a round kick, which is how Lucian Carbin likes his fighters to throw the knee, like a round kick, but with the knee. I think there's a lot to work on for Lazez. Like, his chin was way up in the air. When he started punching in combination, He uses the up elbow straight out of his high guard, which is something that Jonathan Haggerty does as well. It's a nice way to stay covered up, and then if the opponent steps in or gets a little bit too keen trying to swarm on you, you just dig that elbow into their face. However, when he started punching, he'd go left, right, and as his right went out, his left would come back to his nips. He wasn't, and then he'd get cracked with the right hand in return as he swung his left hand from his chest. But yeah, I thought that was the best fight of the night in terms of performance. There were a lot of performance of the night bonuses given out, and I'm like, we're just giving those out for every stoppage now. But performance of the night should be for the performance of the night, and the performance of the night was this decision win over Abdul Razak Al Hassan. What else was good? Some girl submitted another girl with an armbar because she held onto a can opener while the other girl was pushing her face away. Modestus Bokakis, everyone was losing their shit over, but really not a lot happened, and then he elbowed the guy with the, those not quite downward elbows, the Travis Brown elbows, while he was holding onto the hips, and then the guy fell backwards through the cage door because he thought the cage was there and he could lean on it. Kamzat Chimaev was fun enough, just put the Habib-style beating on John Phillips, and then he got darsed in the second round. Lerone Murphy versus Ricardo Ramos was hilarious because Ricardo Ramos is like Don Hyun Kim. He picks one stupid thing to do and does it a dozen times every fight. Don Hyun Kim had that fight where he threw 100 crane kicks at Sean Pearson to try and catch him out. And then he knocked was it Eric Silver he knocked out with a spinning back fist? So everything was a spinning back fist against Tyron Woodley, and Tyron Woodley just sparked him. But for Ricardo Ramos in this one, it was the behind the leg kick. What's it called in football? Can't remember, but where you step your right foot behind your left and kick their calf with your right foot. It's something Anderson Silva did like once, just to show off. And to be honest, it wasn't bad. The first couple of times he did it, he actually caught the guy's foot and knocked it across himself, but you're not in position to follow up. I mean, maybe if you drilled doing this into a spinning back kick or into a high kick with the same leg, pivoting on that, on the foot you're crossing over behind, but it's not going to win you anything, or it's just a dickhead move, and he was doing it a load. But he did do this nice thing that he's done a couple of times, where he throws his right hand to get into an exchange, ducks the opponent's left hand, and keeps his left hand over their right shoulder, so that he can pop up to their back, pull himself in with a claw grip, and start taking their back. But Murphy put him on the ground and TKO'd him, which was pretty cool. I thought Murphy looked really good, took this one at short notice, but then this is the Fight Island thing. You take your short notice fight against your ranked opponent, so we get some where it's just guys who clearly aren't ready, fighting Tyson Nam, who's in the best shape of his life and just murdering them. But you also get guys coming in, like that guy who knocked out Frank Camacho just out of nowhere. It's a chance to get your name on the map for taking a short notice fight. He says, having forgotten the name of the guy who beat Frank Camacho. Anyway, anything else good on this card? Well, I mean, Rivera versus Staman was good, or Stamen, whatever it is. Sexy man plant parts. But I thought, it was pretty fun, because Jimmy Rivera is a guy who doesn't pick up a lot of knockouts, but can be pretty effective going forward and bullying people. And he did that really well in this fight, though Cody Stamen did do some nice turnarounds. There was a beautiful switch off a double leg on the cage in round 2, I think it was. Yeah, and the other thing about Rivera backing Stamen up in the early going was that he was able to mitigate some of the kicking that Stamen does. So Stamen would throw a low line side kick, and he'd do it from too close in, and Rivera would just slap it across and hit him with, I think it was a body shot and then a shot upstairs as he turned his back. It was a decent fight, not bad. I mean, that's what you get when Cody Stamen fights, and when Jimmy Rivera fights, actually. It's a good fight, technical fight, not always the most exciting fight in the world, but there's stuff to go, oh yeah, like that. It's an MMA fix for the moment. That's what it is. I mean, I don't think I need to talk about anything else on that card. Let's have a look at the week's second card, Fight Island 3. So this is an odd one because it's a do-over of a fight that they just didn't really like. Well, I mean, the flyweight division is a bit of a shit show anyway. DJ had left, but if you look at the state of his fights in one, he's lost a bit of a step. Henry Cejudo went to bantamweight and decided not to do any more flyweight stuff, despite being like, I'm saving the flyweight division. And then they decided to do this fight between Figueiredo, who was really coming up fast and looking impressive, and Joseph Benavidez, who was established as a top contender forever. And I think it was that win over Jussier Formiga really cemented it. Knocked out Formiga. Formiga, very hard guy to finish. No, didn't someone just finish him with low kicks the other day? That was dope. But yeah, I mean, I did a Filthy Casuals guide before their first one, and I think it still applies to this one. However, it was taken down by the UFC. That was the one they claimed, which is always a pain in the ass because you can counterclaim them, but it takes weeks and weeks for them to not do anything and then to allow your video back up again. So I thought about re-uploading it, but then I was like, I can't be fucked. I re-uploaded my Jorge Masvidal one the other day, but I much prefer just doing them again and doing them new because they look so much better. You know, it's like anything. When you go back and you look at something you did like 2 months ago, you go, oh God, I was shit back then. And I'm sure I'll do that about stuff I'm doing now in 3 months' time. The stuff we pointed out in that first one and in the pre-fight podcast and stuff came up. Joey B, very fun scrambler, very competent scrambler, very good wrestler. Crafty on the feet, but very, very messy on the feet. And I think that's become more of a thing. It was sort of under control when he was working with Dwayne Ludwig and, is it Buckles? Back in Team Alpha Male. He left, he went to, I think it's Extreme Couture. He came in looking just dreadful against Sergio Pettis, striking-wise, that is. And he built it up again from there and started looking like a bit like his old self. But he's still leading with his face. You know, he always shifted into these punches. He throws from either stance. He'll throw a left to step through and then swing a right. And whether his right's the rear hand or the lead hand, that's the emphasis of the combination. He swings his right and he hits people and knocks them out. You know, he's also got good kicks, lovely left body kick from Southpaw and so on. But really, it's the shifting into the right hand. And he's been leading with his face so badly for quite a while now, even against Cejudo when it was sort of under control. Cejudo, king of the nodder, was able to just drop his head and smash it into Benavidez's face every time Benavidez ran in. There is a moment in that fight where the very first meaningful blows come as he hits him with his head and then comes out with a left hook afterwards and starts flurrying. That's an Evander Holyfield classic. You catch them with your head to stop them, and as they rebound off the top of your head, you hit them with the left hook. Lovely combination. Though only one of the blows is legal, so I suppose it doesn't count as a combination. It counts as an accidental clash of heads into a left hook. And then I think it's in the first round or second round, he catches Benavidez coming in with the top of his head into Benavidez's face, and they hit the clinch, and Benavidez drops, like, into half guard. It's not that Cejudo has thrown him or anything, or tripped him, or pulled the body lock in and folded him over. He just drops. He's been stunned by the headbutt. And it's amazing how many people have never seen this shit. With that said, the one against Deiveson Figueiredo that people were going mental about, the one he cut himself open with just before getting knocked out by Deiveson Figueiredo, that was the top of his head, his brow, forehead, was hitting Deiveson Figueiredo in the face. So that wasn't a nodder. That wasn't Deiveson Figueiredo doing that, because the way you want to clash heads is how Henry Cejudo or Evander Holyfield does it. You drop your head, you drop your face so you're looking down, and the top of your head goes into their face. You never want you never want to be head to head, and you never want to be your face on their head. And that's how Deiveson Figueiredo took that headbutt. So don't put too much stock in Deiveson Figueiredo deliberately headbutting him. Did he recognize he was cut and hurt? Yes. Did he knock him out of it? Yes. But it was entirely Benavidez's fault. The other stuff that Benavidez does was on show in that fight. He was hitting him with good blows. He was sneaking through blows. He was throwing in 3s and 4s, landing loads, and Figueiredo was laughing them off, which is nuts because, like, Benavidez is one of the bigger punchers at flyweight. It's mainly dudes having to run around being scared of his power, and Deiveson Figueiredo's like, nah, I don't care, mate. Even though his face is getting lumped up and stuff, and it's pretty crazy to watch him do that. But Deiveson Figueiredo has always been a wild man. Like, sometimes he'll look incredible, and sometimes he'll just do stupid shit, and you're going, what? I don't think Deiveson Figueiredo, unless he's so much better than everyone else in the division that he can just keep winning title fights, I don't see him being a long-reigning champion, because the way he fights is a mess. He doesn't build towards anything. He'll just randomly decide, I'm going to knee now, and he'll just throw 4 knees in 10 seconds. And then drop the idea altogether. It's the same with body shots. It's the same with jabs. He just goes to ideas for 10 seconds at a time and then gives them up. But surprisingly decent grappler. And like, he'll hit a reactive double really nicely. He took Benavidez down off the first kick that Benavidez threw, which is pretty cool. Because Benavidez was the wrestler, the grappler, and everyone was expecting that, and he took him down. Benavidez immediately grabbed the leg and funk rolled, and when you funk roll, one of the things that you're always thinking when you're watching guys do funk rolls, particularly like Benavidez, to get back to their feet quickly, is possible crucifix or reverse triangle there. And Figueiredo actually attacked the reverse triangle, ended up in an armbar with the knee in. And yeah, some brilliant little scrappy exchanges in the first fight on the ground. Really, I don't think this rematch would be happening if Figueiredo had made weight, which is a tremendous shame. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, what else could they do? If they moved on, people would be mad. If they stuck on it, people would be like, why are you doing this again? When he was sparked so cleanly the first time. But, I give him a chance. The amount that Figueiredo just lets people hit him in the face. And I've seen him stunned, and there were punches that Benavidez hit him with that, turned him around slightly. He's always just inches from getting knocked out. I think, one thing that I would say surprised me in the first one was that Benavidez, I expected Benavidez's conditioning to be a major factor, given that Figueiredo has tended to slow down towards the end of to the end of his fights, though he's only been in, he's only got 3 rounds before. As a flyweight, you never need to go 5 rounds unless it's a title fight, which is pretty great. But by getting on Benavidez early and causing those scrambles and making him work, Benavidez slowed down pretty quick in that fight. I would say it would be very interesting to see Benavidez fight a more measured game plan, be more cautious with the kicks, stay on his feet, move, attack low kicks and low kicks, and or high kicks, which can be harder to catch generally in MMA because everyone blocks one-handed, and just draw this fight out and see what the difference is in the later rounds. But yeah, so there's that fight, which is, it feels like the first fight happened so recently and was so decisive that it's hard to get excited for this one. But what happens if Benavidez wins? Do we have to have a rubber match? I don't know. But then you've got the co-main event, which is the other interesting fight on the card, which is Jack Hermansson versus Kelvin Gastelum. And it's so strange to think that Jack Hermansson was cusp of a title shot until his last fight. Everyone was excited for Hermansson. He'd gone from strength to strength. He was improving so much. He made Jacare look very average. He made, he finished Meerschaert, Branch, Laties. But it seems like he's kind of an Overeem style fighter where if he's thinking about someone's punching power, he fights completely differently to how he fights when he's not that concerned. Jacare's a big hitter, didn't care, just boxed his face off. But Cannonier and Thiago Santos, he looked petrified against them. The Cannonier fight had real Overeem shades because he was just, when he was throwing, it was very clearly just out there to be doing something. He wasn't committing to trying to hit this dude. And even if you're a volume fighter who throws a lot of jabs and things, there's a real difference between just looking busy and actually landing good shots. And then was it an uppercut he dived onto right at the start of the second round? But yeah, such an interesting, I suppose it's that thing we'd always talk about, it's not, I have the wrestling and the striking, so if the striking doesn't work, I go to the wrestling. It's that the two things play off each other. So your wrestling is more effective by having your striking there. And if your striking is garbage, he knows the shot's coming, so it gets a lot harder. But Gastelum's on a bit of a downward trajectory himself. He won the split over Jacare back in 2018, fought Adesanya for the interim belt. Great fight, everyone remembers that. But it really, Gastelum's moments were fleeting, I would say. It took Adesanya a while to get a grasp on just how quick Gastelum was, and then once he did, it was a lot more methodical the later going. And then the Darren Till fight, Till, not the classic Till performance, but very much the sort of Till performance you wanted to see that Darren Till is taking it seriously, his losses, kept his chin down, but more importantly, used the clinch, intercepted with knees, things like that. Just a very measured performance to cut down a guy who likes to burst in on straight lines and smother him so that he can't follow up in combination. So in this one, you've got really exciting, fun top player in Hermansson versus scrambly-ass bottom player in Gastelum. Gastelum's big strength in moving up in weight was that he's happy to be taken down. He'll just get up to his hands and knees and he'll arm roll you, or he'll just stand up and break your hands apart. He's almost entirely a wrestler in MMA. It's incredible. No real emphasis on the bottom game, no re-establishing guard. He's no, I'd rather you pass my guard and I turn to my knees. But with the striking, if you're Hermansson, I think the thing is, how far can you drag this fight on? Because obviously, if Gastelum's working in bursts, it gets easier towards the end of the fight. However, this is only a 3-round fight. It's so funny thinking back to that Ultimate Fighter episode where it was Coach's Challenge 5K around the track, and Robert Whittaker, who's in condition and does like road work, as in actual road work, as in long distance, low intensity stuff year round, just takes off and does it. And Kelvin Gastelum, who's very much one of those people who's like, oh, I do sprints up to the fight, he was vomiting in like the first lap. I was talking about this the other day with Vanderlei Silva and that snorkel shit. Do you remember that? I'ma hit the tire with the snorkel on until I'm sick. It's like in MMA, and the Diaz's get on at this too. It's like in MMA, everyone wants a gimmick to work really hard for like 5 minutes a week. Everyone's training harder, and they don't just want to go out and grind on the road for a while, or just do something for like an hour and a half. Everyone's got to be explosive. Everyone's got to be hitting a tire with a fucking sledgehammer. With Hermansson, obviously fighting a southpaw and Gastelum, he's very good at hand fighting the jab and not being there for the jab, and he's going to shoot the left straight whenever he can and come with the right hand behind it. Yeah, I'm quite interested in this one because Hermansson, a lot of it was the jab and the low kicks, and the feints were really working for him so well. I think with a hand fight against an awkward southpaw, that could be quite interesting. So the other big one on the card worth caring about is Davi Ramos versus Arman Sarukian. Davi Ramos, jiu-jitsu ace, wasn't too accomplished in jiu-jitsu until he decided to go to MMA, and then he came back to do ADCC and won it. But he's just coming off the loss to Islam Makhachev. I say just, that was a little while ago. September 2019. And he was on a 4-fight winning streak before that where he finished... Oh, no, sorry, he didn't finish everyone. He won a decision over Austin Hubbard in his one before the Islam Makhachev fight. Austin Hubbard, we sang the praises of the other week. Mr. Anti-Grappler. But Arman Sarukian, his last loss is to Islam Makhachev, and then he won that one over Olivier Aubin-Mercier. But that was July. He's not fought in a long old time. I think this could be a really fun one. Davi Ramos got drawn too much into the striking with Makhachev, and he did some interesting stuff off his back by turning off the fence in that one. Played some K control, and the last few minutes of that fight were really interesting because they were sort of an anti wall and stall, not wall and stall, sit on the ankles against the wall, Habib style stuff, strategy. But Arman Sarukian, had that barn burner with Makhachev, and his game on the feet, but just a super exciting grappler too. So I think you've got an interesting matchup here because they'll come out and they won't throw pretty strikes, but they'll definitely go for each other. Neither man is in the position that Makhachev was against both, where he could just sort of sit back, throw the odd kick, shoot straight punches, and just out-smooth them. And then if they hit the mat, who knows? Arman Sarukian does crazy shit like butterfly sweeping just to come up on the high crotch on the other leg. And Davi Ramos is a jiu-jitsu god. So, we'll see. But definitely the one that's catching my eye the most. And then the other one is the return of Joe Duffy. Can't believe how long he's been with the UFC now. He was in the UFC since 2015. Won his first 2. Lost to Dustin Poirier while making Dustin Poirier look very bad. Won a couple more, and then got knocked out by James Vick and lost the decision to Mark Jacasey back in March of 2019. Man, and the James Vick loss was November 2017, so this guy does not fight nearly enough for how good he is. And it might be having an effect on how, not having all the fight experience might be having an effect on how the fights are going. If you get in there every few months and it's just business as usual, it can really help a fighter mentally. But that Joe Duffy has buttery smooth hands, and his opponent Joel Alvarez had a couple in the UFC, lost to Ismagulov back in February last year, and then his last fight was a win in June of last year. So both guys not been around for about a year almost. Well, yeah, a year. Shit. Yeah, I mean, personally, in an entirely selfish way, hope Joe Duffy is able to win this one and look good doing it. So let's do a couple of questions. Hey, Jackie Slackytron. Arm trapping is extremely effective in BJJ. Brackets, Danaher Death Squad, Marcelo, everyone and their mother. So why don't we see MMA practitioners utilize it when they have someone's back? I'd imagine if someone had another's back, they could bait them by punching their skull, then cross-gripping their hand, feeding it, trapping it with the leg, and hunting for the sub. Am I missing something here, or am I just mental? Cheers from Sam. Well, it started in MMA. I believe BJ Penn was doing it before Marcelo Garcia. You go back and watch his very early UFC fights. Who was that lad? Joey something or other. He trapped his arm with his leg and then was using the hand over the mouth to try and get the choke in. Yeah, Penn made it famous, and Marcelo obviously then took it to the next level. You've seen those amazing clips of him getting both arms against Ben Askren when they're rolling and stuff like that. But Marcelo really built on that, and the Danaher Death Squad, again, have done amazing things with it. I think that when you're talking about back control in MMA, you're dealing with a different situation anyway. Like, if you watch the Danaher Death Squad's tapes on... if you watch John Danaher or Gordon Ryan's tapes on back control, they're talking about how they can, if your hand's being controlled, you can just pull it back over the opponent's shoulder and then put it back in, or you can just strip the grip. With gloves, life is really, really hard. And, savants like Ryan Hall will tell you the same thing. Put it this way. Eddie Bravo told a story about how he was called up by the head of 10th Planet Korea, being like, my guy's just signed to fight Marcelo Garcia in Marcelo Garcia's MMA debut. What's he got to do? And Eddie Bravo's like, oh shit, he's going to lose. But he says, just work on rear naked choke defense. And then Marcelo gets his back in the fight and can't finish. And Marcelo was the best finisher from the back in the world at the time. Possibly ever, if you're really into superlatives. Alternatively, Ryan Hall got on Artem Lobov's back for, the best part of 10 minutes. If he had his back in a jiu-jitsu contest, probably would have choked him by then. But it's so hard when the guys, because you got an added inch around your hand, which the opponent can just lock their hands around. And of course, don't underestimate guys actually putting their fingers in the glove, which does still happen. And then I think that also, like, BJJ, and particularly, like, if you look at Marcelo and Gordon Ryan and people like that, the whole thing is the hunt for the back. That's why you got rolling back takes and all that shit going on in BJJ. In MMA, it's stay on top, do damage. And you only get the back when the opponent shows the back, and that's normally because you've knocked them down or you've hurt them with something from mount. And then you really want the quick finish. Like, if you watch loads of the most high-profile finishes by rear naked choke, I think of things like Gomi versus Kawajiri or Fedor versus anyone. It's normally because they've cracked them in the head and they just dive and try and wrench their hand under the opponent's throat. In BJJ, you are getting the back and then you're going to work methodically from there. I think in MMA, if you get the back, you're like, fuck, the fight's over, go wild. And then you get stuck there, like Randy Couture versus Tim Sylvie. You're just like, oh, fuck, can't give this up because it's the best position in the game. But also, I'm tired and can't really work from here. What I am enjoying is people like, I mention this fight all the time, but Diego Ferreira versus Anthony Pettis. Pettis has done really well escaping back control and turning back into people's guards. And he did it like 8 times against Charles Oliveira. And Charles Oliveira, very good finisher generally and grappler. But Diego Ferreira seemed well aware of that, so he was, instead of like hunting for the neck when he got the back, he went for the neck, realised he wasn't going to get it, fought the hands and came up on top into like quarter mount and started smashing Pettis with the arm stuck underneath him. And then Pettis, like the rear naked choke comes on the side, like he's on top of Pettis and on the side because Pettis is turning away from him. He's not like diving underneath Pettis and pulling him on top to try and pursue the choke. I think it's just a lot of it is different attitudes. In terms of hand trapping, like people recognize it's a real thing because people do it more in MMA than they do in BJJ, just not from that position. Like the mounted crucifix, you won't really do that very much training with jiu-jitsu players for jiu-jitsu competition or just grappling competition generally. Unless you're trying to set up like a reverse triangle or something like that from the top. But in MMA, mounted crucifix is a huge deal. In fact, in MMA, mounted crucifix, half guard, if the opponent reaches for your arm, you can bring your free knee over the top, press it into the floor and start hitting them. Like Kevin Lee's great at that. Who was doing it the other day? Might have been Yan versus Aldo. But yeah, if you can trap the guy's hand from half guard in MMA, you can do real damage and maybe even finish him. It doesn't mean anything in jiu-jitsu, which is, the trade-off. Cheers, Sam. Hi, Jack. Seems a bit out there, but was wondering your thoughts on a Conor versus Volkanovski matchup. Would Conor still be king? or would Volkanovski be able to utilize his point fighting skills from Chris? I like that. I like that match a lot. I mean, we're supposed to be like, yeah, Conor's not very good, but he was very, very good at featherweight. I think the interesting part there is no one really went to McGregor's legs that much. It tended to be the sort of like, if you kick my leg, I will throw my left hand up the center every time. And that worked for Holloway against Aldo. It didn't work against Volkanovski, and then in the second fight, he really just didn't try that at all. But Conor was obviously very good at coming out right off the bat and pushing the opponent onto the fence and making it very hard for them to do anything without him shooting something up the center. If you crowd people, it makes it very hard for them to kick, obviously. Volkanovski, good banger. So yeah, that'd be interesting. Whether McGregor could get to his body with kicks effectively without being taken down. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I'd be fascinated by that matchup. I'm fascinated by Volkanovski at lightweight, to be honest. I mean, we're all out now, like, Max won the second fight, so we don't care about Volkanovski at lightweight matchups, but fuck it. I don't think you have to be the champion for you to have interesting matchups in the division above. But then I've been gagging for Holloway versus McGregor too for ages, and then the whole thing was like, well, can Holloway actually adapt that much to a rematch? And then he did beautifully for that Volkanovski one. So fuck it, give him another chance. But I think, Conor McGregor really did pack on the weight when he decided he was going up to lightweight. And I think he would really struggle to get down to that now. Yeah, I'd be very interested because the one thing that I think Volkanovski has that a lot of McGregor's opponents haven't had is the ability to stick to their game plan or get back to their game plan when things aren't going that great. I think a lot of McGregor's wins came quite early, and I think a lot of them came from people sort of collapsing under the pressure and not being able to get their game going. I think Volkanovski's smart enough to just pursue a clinch or make a fight boring and ugly until he can get back to his element. And while he couldn't take down, he did take down Holloway and wasn't able to do much with it. While he struggled with Holloway in the clinch, he's controlled a lot of very good fighters in the clinch, and Holloway has become pretty exceptional at counter-grappling, basically. Wouldn't be surprised if he's better at dealing with Volkanovski's wrestling attempts than McGregor would be. Certainly, you wouldn't see Volkanovski sprinting in with overhands and trying to grab double legs like Chad Mendes, who, up until Khabib, that was the best wrestler we'd seen him in against. Up until Khabib, that was like the only wrestler we'd seen him in against. Except Alvarez, who didn't really wrestle. Cheers, Chris! Hi, Jack. Not sure if you've seen this before, but the UFC released a clip the other week from the Tough Season 12 that is absolutely bonkers. He leaves the clip. Feels like this would be worth talking about on the pod because it's one of the funniest things MMA related I've ever seen. This drunk Muay Thai specialist, Jean-Charles Skarbowski, effortlessly destroys some of these guys, including Alex Caceres, who he wobbles with a straight right and drops with a leg kick. Can you please talk about this? Cheers, mate. From Tom. Yeah, it is a great clip. I saw it a few weeks ago when they uploaded it, and I remembered loving it. Because I never really watched Tough, but people would talk about little bits of Tough, and you'd go, oh, I need to see that, and you'd pull up the episode. Skarbowski, really interesting character, because he's known as one of the best, what are they called, Farangs, foreigners going over to Thailand and fighting under Thai rules. And he's got a very mixed record because of that, but that's what a lot of Thais have. It's just like, oh yeah, I lost a couple, but then the next weekend I won a couple, because you're fighting so often. But he was number one ranked at one of the stadiums, not Lumpini, the other one, for a little while. He had a fight with Borkow, which I watched a little while ago, where he just turned up chubs. Like, Borkow's bigger than him, and he was just like, yeah, fuck it. And he held his own pretty well. But I watched, who did I watch him knock out the other day? It was in Vegas. It was a weird, they had Tony Weeks as the ref. It was very strange. But yeah, I mean, he's a wonderful figure to learn from because I think there's a lot of if you are a foreigner going over to Thailand, you're going to face difficulties with judging bias anyway. No matter how people try and be like, oh, well, so-and-so didn't win that fight because in Thailand, blah, blah, blah. No, it's probably because it was a close fight and he wasn't a Thai. And the other one is the clinch is a big separating factor because, and the pace of fights, and the heavy use of the teep, which are all sort of absent from, traditional kickboxing, which you'll find everywhere else in the world. They do always say, if you're not doing the clinch, you're just doing kickboxing with elbows. So Skarbowski is one of the interesting characters to look at because he went over there and he fought them under their rules and he did great. Up there with Ramon Deckers. I mean, if you're not following Sylvie Douglas Von Itu's stuff on YouTube, she's fantastic because she's over there winning in the clinch. But yes, Skarbowski is a avid Redditor. If you're on the Muay Thai subreddit, he's often there posting, like, here's a picture of me with 3 other cool Nakmuais from back in the day, outside somewhere in Paris. But he runs like 4 gyms. He's got a gym in Thailand and 3 in Paris. He's just released a couple of instructionals with BJJ Fanatics under their striking site, which I need to check out at some point. I need to review some of this shit at some point. Otherwise, I'm spending all my money and not doing anything with it. But yeah, Skarbowski, well worth a watch, like, in his element, if you want to see him, like, at his best. Because, you know, was he retired by the time he turned up on Tough? Because he was fighting in, like, the 90s. So, he might have been retired by then. He's a bit of a legend. And I mean that in both the actual legend way and in the what a legend way. And I also think that it's just, don't you love people like that, like him, or how Dr. Socrates used to smoke and drink between plays when he was training? Who was it used to smoke between rounds in fights? Might have been Harry Greb. Just those people who are like, yes, nutrition and stuff are very important, but I am also good enough that I'm going to do this. Oh, it was Skarbowski versus Robert Kainarasinghe, which was, yeah, it just surprised me because I've watched a load of Skarbowski fights and he's very slow and methodical, and then he just decided to smoke this guy in the first round. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for this week. I'm going to be back on Monday. We'll talk about all the fights that happened at Fight Island 2. If you missed it, we did a Slacky's Film Room on Tuesday, which I did the fights of the people who just fought last night for the regular folk. And then if you're a Patreon boy, I did some Andy Hook stuff, some Kyoji Horiguchi, Musashi getting murked by Rafael Lovato. We were on Big Nipples watch. So if you want to get that, join the Patreon. And support the podcast and get all the other extra shit we do. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Sergey Spivak is better than Fedor Bless.